Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley with sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing 3 cards featuring the brand new Washi release from Pinkfresh Studio. These products are fabulous. They've had a Washi release in the past, but they've improved it, and I have all the products here to show you. Now today I'm going to be working with the Anemone Magic, which is what you see here. I have the stamps, the coordinating one-piece die, as well as this big, beautiful gold foil washi. Now this pattern repeats itself several times on the roll. I'm not sure how many times, but it's a lot of washi, and it coordinates perfectly with the stamp and the die. And today I thought I would concentrate on sharing some tips and tricks for using these products. Now this stamp is one big piece as well as the die. So all of these images are one piece, and then you have the sentiments below. And I'm going to give you some tips and tricks for stamping that large sentiment as well. And this is really great because the die is all one piece, so it lines up with this large stamp as well as the pattern on the washi. Now there are 4 other stamps, washis, and coordinating one-piece dies that are available in the release, and I will have those linked below, but I'm going to give you a little peek at those here. Out of the 5 washis released, 4 of them have gold foil and 1 does not. And the one that doesn't is called Indigo Vines or Indigo Leaves. I'm not sure, but you'll see it below. Now, I thought I would start out by giving you some tips and tricks for putting this washi down. Since it's a wider washi, I think it's around 4 inches. I like to start with a half sheet of cardstock that's cut to 4 1/4 by 11 inches. So it's just cut in half lengthwise. And I like to get the top started and kind of unroll it as I press it down onto my cardstock. Now, once I get it rolled out to where I have the full pattern showing, I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to grab this slice tool. Now, this slice tool is a tool that I actually bought for my planner, for cutting washi in my planner. And the blade is actually ceramic, so it cuts through the washi really nicely without cutting through the cardstock. So I'm going to use that to just slice through the washi tape. And I tried to use a T-square ruler here, but I did not do a great job of cutting this straight. That's okay. I cut through the washi without cutting through the cardstock, and that was really the ultimate goal. Now I'm going to leave this kind of peeled up a little bit on the end when I store this washi so that it's easy to pull it off the roll. And to make sure there's no air bubbles, I'm going across this with my bone folder, and I just have the long side of my bone folder and I'm just kind of pressing that onto the cardstock. You could also use like a stencil pal tool or something like that, but I just have my bone folder handy and it worked beautifully. Now, as I mentioned before, the die actually comes in one piece, and that makes cutting all of these images out a breeze. When I'm lining it up on my washi and holding it in place with a little bit of purple tape though, I do like to make sure that the purple tape overlaps off of the washi area because the purple tape and the washi don't really like to stick to each other. So if you're only taping to the washi area, you may notice that your die may slip around. So I have that purple tape overlapping onto the exposed cardstock on the edges as well as the top. And I've lined that up. It's really easy to do since it's all one piece. And I am going to put this into my cutting sandwich and run it through my Gemini Junior. Now this die is really long, so before I move it, what I like to do is once it comes out of my die cut machine, I like to flip my cardstock over and have a look at the back and make sure that all of the lines are cut. And as long as I know that it's all been cut through without an issue, then I go ahead and pop the images out. Now, because the die is so long, there's a chance that it might hang off one of the cutting plates, and that's why I kind of flip it all over to make sure everything has been cut before I move the die. And then I am left with these beautiful die cut pieces. It looks like I took forever to watercolor them. And I actually learned from Leah on one of the Pinkfresh live crafting hours that you can put this washi tape onto parchment and then die cut it and remove it from the parchment, and you can use it like stickers instead. For all you planner lovers, that is amazing news. Now, when you start these rolls of washi, you'll notice that I started this roll really carefully. I kind of pinched up the edge all along the entire length or height of that washi and moved really slowly. If you get a little tear in there, it's really easy for that tear to continue down into the pattern of your washi. So when you start it out, make sure you just lift the very edge on this long end of the washi here and go slowly as you remove it. And if you start to get a tear, just kind of splint it with your finger and remove it from the roll and don't allow that tear to continue. Now it's time to work on stamping. And if you'll notice, this Anemone Magic stamp is way too big for my standard misti. And I do have a memory misti that I could have used here. But I thought I would share a tip that I saw by Shannon on the Pinkfresh YouTube channel. And that is using the lid of your misti to stamp these larger stamps instead of pulling out a larger memory misti, or maybe you only have the standard misti. In order to keep this in place, though, and stamping in the same place over and over again, she shared how you can actually tape down the base of your misti to keep it in place. So that way, when I use the lid of the misti to stamp over and over again, it's going to continue to stamp in the same place, and the base of my misti won't move around and cause my stamp to kind of change positions. So I'm just taking a little painter's tape and running it across the base of my misti to hold it in place on my glass mat. On the lid of my misti, I actually have my stamp face up, so it's going to open and stamp onto this cardstock that's on the side. I'm just figuring out where I want to place my cardstock, and then I'm going to hold that in place with a little bit more painter's tape. That's going to allow me to stamp multiple times without my cardstock moving, without my base of my misti moving, and so I can really double or triple stamp this if I need to. Now, once I have everything kind of secured into place, I am going to ink my stamp. So you'll notice once again, this stamp is face up on the lid of my misti. And I'm using the Pinkfresh Studio Hybrid Black ink to ink up this Anemone Magic stamp. And then I am going to swing the door of the misti over to the left into the open position, and that's going to stamp it onto my cardstock. Now, because I'm stamping this onto a hard surface and I don't have the pad of my misti underneath that cardstock like you normally would inside of your misti, I noticed that this does not stamp as well right off. So you're going to need a couple of stamps here. So that's okay, because I have everything secured into place. I can just close the door of my misti again, ink up my stamp again, and then open the door of that misti towards the cardstock that's secured on my work surface and stamp that again. Now, one thing that you do not want to do, I would say, when you're stamping either way with your misti, is kind of let your lid flop into place, because the stamp can kind of bounce around when it hits, kind of ricochet off of your paper and cause like a double stamped image. So you want to make sure that you're controlling the lid of your misti, not just allowing it to kind of flop over. I noticed I had done that one time and I ended up with kind of a messy stamped image. Now, I went ahead and cleaned off my stamp, and I will tell you, I did not do a very good job cleaning off my stamp. But I had this dirty Versamark ink pad, so I didn't care quite as much. And I decided to just bring in another piece of cardstock, secure it into place, ink this stamp up with the Versamark ink, and then stamp that onto the white cardstock. I'm going to do a couple of embossed versions of this, and this first one I'm using gold embossing powder. This is the gilded embossing powder from Brutus Monroe that I'm going to be using. And in order to make sure that I've pressed all over my stamp, I'm going to use a dry microfiber cloth. Now, I have seen these really cool tools that I may just have to pick one up. And they kind of allow you to glide across the door of your misti really easily to make sure you've put pressure over the entire surface of your stamp. And I think I'm going to have to try one of those pretty soon. Now, once I've stamped this onto my white cardstock using the Versamark ink, you can see it's a very dirty ink pad and it's a very dirty stamp, but that's okay. I'm going to take it over and I'm going to pour on the gilded embossing powder and I'm going to tap off the excess. The excess is going into a coffee filter, and then I can just kind of curl that up and funnel it all back into my jar of embossing powder. And then I'm going to heat set this image, or all of these images that stamp as one. And I am left with a really beautiful gold embossed image. Now, I didn't actually use the gold embossed images today on my projects, but I did use the white heat embossed version on vellum. So here's a look at that when it's all gold heat embossed. It's so beautiful. This is perfect for watercoloring or for coloring with copics or colored pencils, whatever you may like. Or you could just leave it gold heat embossed on this white cardstock and it's beautiful as well. Now, I did the same process once again because my misti was already in place, and I stamped this image using Versamark ink onto some Essentials by Ellen vellum, and then I'm covering that image in some white embossing powder and tapping off the excess, and then I'm going to heat set that with my heat tool as well. So I have several versions of this stamp, this Anemone Magic stamp, and I am going to use a mixture of these versions in the cards that I create today. Now, one thing I will mention that I don't think I mentioned before is that I did prep the surface of the vellum and the cardstock with my powder tool to make sure that none of the embossing powder stuck in areas that I didn't want it. And I recommend doing that anytime you're going to heat emboss. And you can see this is my finished large stamped image here. It's going to coordinate perfectly with the one-piece die that makes cutting out all of these images so easily. I'm going to bring that over and I'm going to line it up around these white heat embossed images on the vellum, and I'm going to secure it in place with a little bit of purple tape. I find that if I line up the large image on the top first and kind of get that secured into place, I can kind of tweak the bottom just a little bit if I need to kind of work it into place. And I will end up with a perfectly die cut image each and every time. Now, as I mentioned before, because these dies are long, I do flip this over to make sure I got all of the images cut through, that no parts of my die were hanging off of my cutting plate. And when I'm sure that I have everything die cut, I can pop them out and I have them ready to go. Now, this vellum image I flipped over, and on the back side, I added a little bit of copic coloring. I used a T1 and a T6 marker. I also used an E50 and an R000. I will have all of these linked over at my blog to add just the palest pink color to these anemones. When I was going for my color inspiration, I actually Googled anemones because I'm not super familiar with flowers, and I found these anemones called black-eyed beauties, and I just kind of tried to create that effect with all of my coloring today. So now I have my three versions here. I have a copic colored version on white cardstock. I have the embossed version on vellum that I colored from the back, and then I have the washi tape version. And I'm going to build cards out of all of these. So I started with some basil pale rose cardstock. I die cut it using the diagonal stitched cover plate from Pinkfresh, and then I die cut it using the diagonal stitched rectangle. And I have that set to the side because I thought I would use it on my first card, and I didn't. And then I die cut several more plain white cardstocks of this large anemone piece here so that I could stack up the die cuts. Now, I kind of worked in this weird order because I did pieces of each card kind of as I went. It was like I knew I wanted to stack these up, but I wasn't really sure what background I wanted to put them on. So oftentimes when I run into that while I'm creating, I will complete the steps that I'm certain of. So if I'm certain I want to stack this up, I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. And sometimes as I'm doing this, it allows my mind a little bit of room to breathe, and I can make better decisions about the next steps on other cards that I'm creating at the same time. So I stacked, I think, 3 or 4 white die cuts behind that Anemone Magic piece that I stamped and colored on the white cardstock. And then I die cut several white scalloped frames using the Pinkfresh scallop rectangle dies, I believe is what they're called. They actually cut 2 scallop rectangles at the same time. So this is the larger of the 2 frames. I'm going to stack about 3 of these white frames. And then I'm going to add some liquid adhesive to the top of that stack. And I am going to nestle my vellum version into these frames and stack another 2 gray die cuts on top. So the gray cardstock that I'm using today is the Essentials by Ellen Oyster cardstock. It is a beautiful, I believe it's 100 or 110 pound cardstock, and it is a beautiful gray color. So you can see I've added my vellum piece, and then I'm going to add the gray piece on top of it. Now I was kind of going back and forth between whether I wanted to put this vellum piece on top of the pink base or if I wanted to put it on top of a white card base. And I ended up going with the white card base and keeping everything really subtle on this card. I think this type of card would make a really beautiful sympathy card. And I didn't actually put a sentiment on this card because I feel like it's very simple, very elegant, and very beautiful. And it can be used for so many occasions that I decided not to limit myself at this point by putting a sentiment on it. And I can always add a die cut sentiment later, or I can stamp a sentiment on the inside of the card. Now, to add a little bit more layering and interest to this card, since I did go with a white card base, I die cut the leafy branch die from some heavyweight Nina Solar White cardstock, and I cut it in half, and I'm kind of putting different little sprigs of it kind of coming out the upper right-hand corner and the bottom left-hand corner, just to add a little bit of interest and some kind of white-on-white texture behind the stamped and heat embossed and colored image that I placed inside my frame. And once I have those little leaf pieces down, I added some liquid adhesive on the back of this frame, placed it onto the card front, and then I added a large acrylic block on top of it while it dried. I finished off the card by adding this white panel to an oyster gray cardstock base cut to 4¼ inches by 11 inches and scored at 5.5. I added some clear crystals from Pinkfresh Studio and a little bit of the Nuvo Aqua Shimmer Pin. Now for my second card, I am using the stamped and copic colored version of this Anemone Magic stamp. And I have it stacked up. And for the backer, I created that with the Basil Pale Rose cardstock, the Pinkfresh Studio Radiating Background number 2, and the diagonal stitched rectangles from Pinkfresh Studio. I added that on there, and I added a few of the white heat embossed pieces kind of coming out behind this floral arrangement to kind of fill that out. And I finished it off with some clear crystals from Pinkfresh Studio and a die cut and stacked sentiment, which is also from Pinkfresh Studio, and that's the Essential Classic Word die set. Now, I will have all of the products that I used in these projects linked in the description at YouTube, so if you're looking for something in particular, be sure to check there, because I should have all of these dies and their proper names listed below. Now for this final card, I used that piece that I die cut earlier using the diagonal stitched plaid cover plate and the diagonal stitched rectangle. And I used the smaller rectangle frames that I created earlier with that kind of 2-for-1 die, the scalloped rectangle die from Pinkfresh Studio. Since it cuts 2 frames at once, I already had all the white and the gray pieces that I needed to stack this up again. And once again, I just added that washi piece that's on the cardstock backer, kind of between the white and the gray stacked frames. Now, once I get those adhered together, I am going to take a couple of those extra pieces that are created with the washi tape. They're created with the stamp as well and the coordinating die. And I'm going to add some foam adhesive behind them and add them to a couple corners of the frame to kind of add more dimension to this floral arrangement and kind of give it a little more fullness. And then once again, I'm using those classic words, and this time I've cut the thank you apart in the middle, and I'm adding that on with some liquid adhesive. Now you're going to notice when I added this frame to the pink card front, I actually added it kind of in the lower right-hand corner. So it was slightly off center. I liked that. I don't know, I was doing something different rather than putting it right in the middle. And I thought it was kind of fun to just scooch it down to that lower right-hand corner. And then I added this card front onto my card base using some foam adhesive, and that completes my third card for today. And isn't that washi tape absolutely beautiful with that gold foil detail? I think it is beautiful, and it's such an easy way to create a quick card by adding that washi to the cardstock, die cutting it, and creating this little arrangement. So there you have it, 3 completed cards, a look at the brand new Pinkfresh washi stamp and coordinating one-piece die release, as well as some tips and tricks for using these washi tapes and stamps on your next card project. I really hope you enjoyed these tips and tricks, and I hope you really got a sense for how all of these products kind of work together. Now keep in mind, I only used the Anemone Magic stamps, washi, and coordinating die today, but there are 4 other washis, stamps, and dies that all coordinate in the same way in this release, and I will have those products linked below as well so that you can find those. Now, as I mentioned before, I will have the featured products used in these projects in the description at YouTube, but if you're looking for something in particular, check there. Or you can head on over to my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, a complete list of supplies, including the Copic markers that I used, and some information on a blog hop and giveaway over there. So you'll want to be sure you check that out. This video is a part of a blog hop celebrating Pinkfresh Studio's new washi release. So you'll want to be sure you check out all the inspiration featuring these new products. Thanks for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here on YouTube so you don't miss any of my paper crafting and card making video tutorials. And as always, I would love it if you would share this video with a friend. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.